unexpected and
always totally
stranger
unexpected.
people that come to you with
Right.
literally jewels, with gems of information.
Gems of information.
Anything else interesting that you've discovered in the last month?
Well, this goes back a few months, but it's finally now published in the journal out of Sedona, known as Emergence. And a lady there by the name of Helga Mauro had 2 articles in the current issue. And this one was more or less on her mystical psychic capabilities and what she was doing. That's a fairly good likeness of her in the middle. It turns out that, if you we'll turn to the second page because that's the important part of this.
Hold the microphone here.
Now this article is detailing the history of a father, Fred A. Kuppers, K-U-E-P-P-E-R-S, born in Germany, raised and educated there, and came over with family back before World War II. And he was a very strict authoritarian German. Your children do not speak unless spoken to, and then if you request perhaps something at a time to talk with the father, it has to be something intelligent or don't bother.
And the request has to be submitted in writing, 3 days.
Well, not quite. Her father wasn't that strict. But the interesting part was that before he died on Lincoln's birthday in 1963, he took his daughter aside and said that I've been given 90 days to get my affairs in order, and I'm going to tell you a few things you must know, but you will not remember until you're about 55 years of age. Now, the full details of what I'm telling you are in this article. She has chosen to go public with it. And in this, she tells a story of her father. And the story basically is that he admitted to her he had been involved heavily in the Philadelphia experiment, a number of other government projects. And he had been not only on the moon, but in the moon. And he stated that emphatically.
Inside the moon?
Inside the moon.
Which is another extremely important clue of information in another crazy story that I've been pursuing about the moon being hollow.
Right. And remember, he died in 1963 before we were supposed to have gotten to the moon. And he stated flatly he had been to the moon and in the moon. He also made further statements, all outlined in this article, which, because it's public, I will go public on it. He stated flatly that one of his tasks for the government was to train aliens to work within our government, and there were human types which were totally undetectable. It was his job to train them to work within our government. Period.
Fascinating. So this further blows the cover of the party line ufologists that have been claiming for years that the biggest headache and problem for our government were exactly these totally human-looking aliens that are indistinguishable in a crowd.
Not hardly. Since they were being trained to work in our government by Mr. Fred Kuppers, it puts an entirely different cast on the whole situation. Now, after his 90 days were up, he went back to the hospital for his usual medical checkup, and allegedly he died in the hands of a nun who they totally could not trace afterwards. They had the standard type funeral for someone who was going to be removed from the public circuit, so to speak. And as Helga remembers, very detailed memory now, when she viewed the body in the casket, she found something wrong with it. Her father always had a lot of hair on his fingers and the backs of his hands. The corpse had no hair on the fingers or hands. The face looked very peculiar. It looked almost waxen, as if it was a wax mold. And though pictures were taken of the actual funeral, she was not allowed to see the pictures ever. Apparently still held by somebody else in the family. So they had the funeral, the whole thing was over, and 2 months later, one night when she was in bed, she gets a visit. A very physical visit, not a ghost. First she thought it was a ghost, and it was her father. He came and sat down on the edge of her bed, left a normal impression of a person who has an appropriate weight on the mattress, talked with her for a period of time, and told her, he says, you wanted to see me, so I'm letting you know that I am well and okay, and I'm living in another dimension, in another domain. He said, it's very difficult for me to come here, and it's very painful to go back. But he said, nevertheless, I wanted to come here and reassure you of a few things. And he says, if you really need me sometime, I'll come back. According to her, he has returned once to her and once to another family relative. I believe it was her mother.
So her opinion is that he came as a ghost form and solidified in a material form, or that he secretly worked for a governmental program and was driven by a car one night.
He was not hit by a car one night. He went through the normal dying in the hospital, according to the records. And when he appeared to her in the bedroom, he was very solid. You couldn't see through him. He was just like a normal person. He could shake her hand. He could smell the normal cologne he used, the tobacco he smoked. And after about an hour or so, he says, "I've got to go now." And he got up and walked over towards the wall and disappeared in a Beam Me Up Scotty number, exactly like Joan on Star Trek. She swore that this happened and that this was the way he disappeared. Now the mystery deepens even further.
So he wasn't driven by a car to the place of meeting his daughter, but he was beamed down.
He was beamed down, or beamed through, or whatever you want to call it, to her bedroom where he could talk with her, and then he left from there to return to wherever he returned to. Now, most interestingly, a few weeks ago, she called me and says, "I have absolute proof that he's still alive." I says, "What do you mean?" He said, "I have some technical papers published in Germany, translated to English, of work that he's done with a certain German professor in Germany. And there are 3 or 4 papers with his name attached to it, Fred Kutters." She called the head man at the university where he was alleged to be working and asked him, "Is this so-and-so and so-and-so?" "Well, yes." "Who are you?" "I'm his daughter." "Well, I want to know certain things about physical details." And he confirmed them and said there was no question that this was her father. He says, "I'm sorry, I can't tell you anymore." I says, "Well, I would like copies of certain papers." He says, "Why?" He says, "Because I want them for my grandchildren's scrapbook." "Oh, in that case, you can have them." And she had received them. They were sent to her in the mail, and I obtained copies. They're highly technical papers dealing with magnetometers and magnetic field mapping, magnetic field measurements, all of them in Germany, and all of them taking place in a German university. It's curious because he went through the German university system in the first place, and apparently he's returned there.
Which is another little sign that Germany and Japan and Russia and the other superpowers are in on these secret space travels with the Star
They're on to so much secret stuff.
Star Trek scenario.
It's on to so much secret stuff that's unbelievable as to what they have done and what they've accomplished.
About his going to the moon, I'm extremely curious. Was he in a cave inside the moon, or was he in a more cavernous internal structure?
That I cannot answer because he did not give her any information, merely stated he'd been on and in the moon, and did not elaborate insofar as Helga knows. And I'm quoting, of course, I've talked with her privately long before this article was published and never said anything, but now that it's published, I will talk about it. But it's detailed and it gives a lot of information, background of the family and a few other things. And, of course, raises the serious question, what did the government really do? Obviously, he was part of one of these protected witnesses programs, given apparently for a period of time a new identity, moved to another location. But now he turns up with his true identity in Germany working at a university, which is even more bizarre. That doesn't normally happen. But these papers were written about 1980, in that time frame, 79, 80. And I don't have them with me, or I could show the titles, but I don't want to create a major furor over this. Or perhaps at a future time I can do this. I did not think of bringing those with me unless they're in this envelope, which I can check. But there's a lot of background data there involving Helga, what she's been through. Her memory was wiped and erased until a few years ago, at the time about the age of 55, when she was told, no, I don't have those with me. I got some spare copies for you. Next time. And she has been thoroughly involved in trying to find out the real history of her father. And she is finding out more and more. And her memory of those period of time when he told her so many things and said, you will forget this until you're about 55, then you will remember it, and you will also become one of the world's greatest psychics. And he also told her on tears that he says, I'm very sorry about the way I treated you when you were a young girl. He says, I had to do that to be stern.
But this is what the party required from me, and I had to
precisely
follow my party call.
Precisely.
Fascinating.
But he did say this. He said, I wish I could tell you who I really am, but I can't. Which indicates there's a still deeper part of this mystery.